Hi, I'm Anisi Chenault with the Office of Public Housing Investments, and this module of the training is going to be talking about some tips for grant monitoring for the field office grant administrators. So first of all, thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for working really hard over the past couple of years to follow through with all of the pieces and changes that we've been asking you to do. It's really been amazing over the past 2 or 3 years since we've started doing monthly calls, since we put together the desk guide, that we've seen an incredible change in the time it takes to get grants executed, in the compliance with all of the grant monitoring, with the logic models, with the back and forth that's had to go through that. So we know that you always have a ton of work on your plate, and just really want to thank you so much for the concerted effort that you've been putting in over the past couple of years specifically to help our programs get stronger. So a couple of things we wanted to talk about today. Some are sort of more technical, and then some are more relational. And they're kind of interspersed throughout. So some tips that especially Charles wanted to make sure that you had were that it's really important to review the LOCKS grant extract. And that's the LOCKS report. It's a spreadsheet that comes every week, about once a month. I go through and color code it, and so I'm sure you've seen the very colorful spreadsheet. But it's really meant to be a tool for you to see all of your grants at one time and be able to kind of monitor how are draws going, what expirations might you have coming up, is there anything that needs immediate attention. So just each week as that comes out, take a look at it. Once you become really familiar with your grants, you won't have to spend much time with it, but it's a tool that we're hoping will be helpful. We'd also like to suggest that you consider contacting your grantees at least once a quarter to just do sort of a checkup of all of their grants. And the way that I would recommend doing that is for each one kind of pulling up their whole history of grants on that LOCKS extract and kind of seeing, do they have a history of working really well, expending on time, or do you kind of think maybe they've had some issues in the past, especially if they're being slow in expending some of their grants, kind of asking them what's going on, did they have a coordinator quit, making sure that maybe they're not paying their coordinator out of another source of funds and not actually pulling from this grant, because we actually see that happening a lot. And we think that doing the in-person actual kind of relational check-in will really help to establish that relationship so that when you see something go wrong, you're not sort of cold calling and all of a sudden they don't know who you are and you're just making demands. But also what we'd really like to see is that the grantee will be comfortable enough with HUD to start giving you a call when they see that something might be going wrong, if they have a question, they just need some guidance. So we really want it to be a two-way street, and that can be done by calling when things are good as well as when there are challenges. We also recommend that you maintain a grant tracking tool of all of the grants assigned to your field office. Now, you can make this by printing out your LOCKS snapshot, or some grantees make up their own tracking tools and set up a tickler system in their Outlook so that 60 days before one of the grants comes due, they have a little reminder that pops up to say, hey, contact this grantee and make sure that they're going to expend on time, or do they need an extension, or whatever that might be. But basically just kind of make it part of your daily work to be aware of where your ROS and FSS grantees are in terms of their expenditures and in terms of their other deadlines. And then we would also recommend to maintain a grant file for each grantee. Unfortunately, some of you have been privileged to be part of all of the wonderful OIG and GAO investigations that have been taking place, especially over the last 12 months or so. And we've been coming back to you and asking you for grant files or information from your grantees that may even go back to 2005. So if you have either an electronic and or a paper version of everything starting from the application through the grant execution documents and all the reports that they've sent in for each grant. It's going to make it easier both for you to track all of that, and then also just in case we get requests for information on specific grantees, it'll be helpful for you to have that there at your fingertips. Some other questions or thoughts about doing reviews are, if your office is doing any kind of on-site reviews, we recommend just to give a little reminder that FSS programs and ROS programs should be part of any on-site review. But then if you're doing remote quarterly reviews, you should feel free to be able to ask for activity logs or sign-in sheets for any kind of programs or activities, especially if you have any concerns about what are they really doing, are they really connecting with the number of people that they're mandated to connect to. We have more data on the FSS program through PIC, but a lot less data on ROS. So you should feel free to request that information to your comfort level, because ultimately, they're going to be responsible to you about, are they spending their money correctly, and are they engaging the residents that they need to engage. So we also recommend, I know that in the ROS program they have funds for training. And so a lot of the ROS grantees use their money to go to conferences and things like that. But in FSS, there's no extra money for training. So an idea might be to invite the grantees to come into the field office for technical assistance and training if they're either not using their ROS training or travel funds, or if they don't have any travel funds, a car ride may be very doable. Now, we understand there's grantees across the state and you're only in one locale, so not everybody can make that happen. But we also think there's a strong benefit to getting folks together to be across the table from each other to talk about their challenges and the things that they found that really work well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But also, if you don't have funds in your office to do on-site monitoring, maybe consider using the GSA car if there's housing authorities that are within a decent drive from your field office. If you have access to that car, that may be one way to sort of get out and have some face time with your grantees. So we already talked about using grant monitoring on other on-site reviews, all of those different kind of reviews that your office does. And I know you only get to a very small portion of of the housing authorities each year. So just use that as well as you can. And one of the things that we're going to be doing here at the headquarters level too is we've already been talking to the Office of Field Operations just to really emphasize the fact that you as field office grant managers are doing so much work, and it really is an important part of the work that you have on your plate. And so we want to be able to get that recognized and make sure that you're sort of getting credit for it in your workload. So one way to do that too is to possibly insert yourself or remind people in other reviews that are happening that, hey, ROS and FSS grants are part of what we need to be looking at too. Same thing with cross-collaboration monitoring with other program offices. So if there's things going on with CPD or fair housing or multifamily, there are links to FSS and ROS kind of in all of those areas. So just another thought about maintaining the visibility of the program within your field office. And then also recommending that you check locks on a weekly basis to ensure the timely processing of vouchers. So you get the locks extract, that's one thing, but then also the locks vouchers, to actually go into the lock system, you may have vouchers sitting there waiting for your approval. Now, I think we all know most grantees, if they've put in a voucher and they haven't gotten their money, will probably pick up the phone and call you. But just in case, to recommend to actually look at that every week or so, just to make sure there's nothing sitting there waiting for you. Now, in terms of the NOFA processing, so I know we talk about it a lot, but with each new NOFA, we make changes. And especially for FSS this year, we're going to make some pretty major changes. And so it's really, really important when the NOFA comes out to read the general section. I know it's the most boring thing you've ever read, but try to read it anyway. And then also read your grant NOFA. And the reason for that is that your field offices, especially the better you get to know them, the more trust that you build with them, the hope is actually that they will start calling you with the questions. And absolutely, if you don't know the answer or unsure, definitely give us a call or send an email to headquarters, and we're more than happy to collaborate to get the right answer out. But it's really great if you do know the answer, because you are reading the same thing that your applicants and grantees are reading. And in addition, we really recommend that you watch the NOFA webcast, and maybe even consider inviting the applicants into the office to view the webcast together. Again, transportation and cost may be an issue, but some will come in, and that FaceTime can be really good. There's also, we'll talk about the NOFAs as they come out in the monthly FOGA conference calls. And then we also recommend that you familiarize yourself with Grants.gov and SAMS. And those are the systems that the grantees or the applicants are going to need to work through in order to even submit their application. And we know that there's a lot of questions every year about Grants.gov, even though we've been using it for several years. So I would recommend actually going into Grants.gov when the NOFAs come out and pretend like you are an applicant. So go to the front page and say, okay, if I'm an applicant, what am I seeing here? What do I have to do? So I'll recommend that you go in and search by CFDA number, and it's 14.870 or 14.877, depending on the grant program. And then what will happen is that you'll come to a page where there'll be two things for you to download. One is the actual application, and one is the download zip file, or the instructions download zip file. So I would recommend that you actually download both of those things as if you were an applicant and save them to your computer system. I do this every year, and I can't tell you how valuable it is, because when applicants call and have questions, and sometimes they're sort of technical nitty-gritty questions about the forms or a piece of something that they don't really understand, you can actually go in and see exactly what they're seeing. Not only that, but the application disappears from Grants.gov once the application due date is final. So I know a lot of you have asked us for blank logic models, and there's no place to get a blank logic model except for the application. We can work with OSPM to get them here, but if you download the instructions download zip file, that blank logic model that's out with the application, you'll have that there in your system, and you can pull that up anytime you want and share it with applicants or grantees anytime you might need that blank, the blank form. So that's just one thing to have there. But it's also really good to kind of go through the process, see how the application works, moving forms from one box to the other box, watching how you open them, seeing what's mandatory, what's not mandatory. Any of you who've gone through this process with grantees for the past 5 or 6 years that we've been using Grants.gov are probably familiar with it now. But if you're new to this process, I would really recommend doing that, because if you go through it, you'll be able to more easily respond to your grantees' questions on the NOFA process and the application process. The other thing that you should do when you go into Grants.gov is sign up for the alerts. Again, pretending like you're an applicant. When you go down to download those two things, there'll be a screen where it says, would you like to get alerts about this grant? I always sign up just as myself using my HUD email. And that's really wonderful, because then you will receive any kind of notices that the applicant community receives. And what I've found is sometimes the notices are worded funny or it's confusing. And if I don't sign up just like a grantee to get those notices, sometimes I'll start getting calls of people being very confused or upset, and I won't know what they're talking about. So again, the more you can do to kind of simulate what your applicants are going through, the better TA you're going to be able to provide into the process. So on a bigger scheme of things, we'd also really like you to familiarize yourself with Goal 3 of HUD Strategic Plan, which is of course, using housing as a platform to improve the quality of life of our residents. And that's really what we're all about here with ROS and FSS. And we were really excited under the Obama administration when the strategic plan changed, and we had this goal 3 for the first time, that we could really say, yes, here's the place within the whole overall scheme of HUD that our work fits. And this is why our work is important. And within Goal 3, there are actually strategies and metrics for measuring everything from health to early childhood education to community safety, working with specialized populations like elderly and people with disabilities. So all of these pieces are actually in our overall strategic goal. And one of the things that we're really working on here at headquarters is trying to figure out how to remind the rest of HUD that this work is just as important as actually building units or maintaining units. That we're really talking about the people who live in the units that we build and maintain. And ultimately, they are our customers, and changing those lives is what's really gonna help our economy and our country. And so just to kind of refresh yourself about why it is that we do this work. I would recommend going into HUD Strategic Plan, which you can get to from HUD at Work, and just kind of reading through the Goal 3 section. I always get really excited when I do that because I say, yeah, that's why I come to work every day. And I know that some of you have talked about that's why you come to work every day. So just to kind of remember that, and then also to talk about that sometimes with your grantees and about how this work really relates to the rest of the work of HUD, both with your grantees and with the rest of your office. And then we're constantly passing on resources, whether it might be some grants are available or other government programs, or there might be some best practices that come out or research studies or things like that. So sometimes we try to pass those on directly to you, and we actually, depending on the information, sometimes we send it to the director of your office, but a lot of times we send it directly to you because we know if we send things to the director, it gets lost, or it may never filter down to you and then get out to the grantees. So when we do send you stuff directly and ask you to pass it on to the grantees, that's why, because you all are the ones that actually have those connections to your grantees. Believe it or not, we actually don't have an email list of all 300 grantees every year. So we rely on you to be the intermediary to get information to your grantees. So we really do appreciate that that's part of the role that you play. Another place to get resources and information, both for yourself and to pass on, is if your region has one, which not every region does, sign up for your monthly FPM newsletter. And especially if you're in Region 3, they have a really fantastic newsletter. Several other regions have one. If you're not sure if you do, feel free to email me, and I have figured out a list of the regions that do and the links to connect to that. But it's a lot of articles about what's happening, but also trainings that might be available, or again, research that might have been published on the kind of work that HUD does. So just sign up for that. It's something that comes in your email once a month. And then also, I don't know if you guys already know about it, it's something we try to talk about a lot, and it's actually if you've ever gotten an email from me, it's in the little button at the bottom of my email signature, is our HUD Supportive Services Resources page. And if you go to HUD.gov and try to find it through PIH, it's actually under Hope 6, but for many years now, we've really intended it to be a resource for all housing authorities, and that's where we post notices, the notice that we put out about collaboration and partnership in 2011. That's where we post, again, any new grant opportunities that come up, any innovative programs that we find. There's some examples of good newsletters that we put up there. So we really do try to make that a central repository of information and update that webpage. So if you haven't been there, go and look. and pass on that information to your grantees. And again, the more you talk to them, the more you'll know what they need, and the more little flags will go up, little reminders as you read things that, oh, maybe Wilson Housing Authority could benefit from this, or oh, maybe El Paso Housing Authority might be interested in that. So just another sort of piece of resources that might be helpful to you in your job. Another thing that's actually on that page too is in 2009 and 2010, we did intro trainings for our Ross grantees. And we haven't been able to do it since then because of budgetary reasons, but all of the training material from those in-person trainings that we did are on the website as well. So again, if you've got a new grantee, they're not really sure where to start, there are job descriptions, there are examples of how to keep files, there's information on reporting, there's sample assessments and advertising for the programs that PHAs can use. There's sample training or individual training and services plans that are this all on that website. So it might be really helpful for your grantees, especially the newer ones. Some other ideas are to be asked to be put on your grantees' newsletter distribution lists. A lot of housing authorities put out a monthly or a quarterly newsletter, and there's a couple from different places across the country who have put me on their distribution list, and so I get them, and it's really wonderful to see what's happening in different housing authorities all over the country, and it's so just great to see what creative ideas are happening, and then to pass those on to other folks. There's so much that can really be done, even in this time of the economic austerity. But people get really, really creative, and it's so nice to not have to reinvent the wheel, to be able to say, oh, somebody else did this, let's see how we can do something similar. And then also, when you talk to them on a quarterly basis or whenever it might be, ask to be invited to their events and graduations. We are usually invited to the big graduation that the Montgomery County, Maryland FSS program has every year. And they have a very large program, and they usually graduate 20 or 30 people, but they have a whole ceremony, and every graduate speaks and talks about the impact of the program and what it means to them and their kids. And I tell you, not one person leaves there without a dry eye. And if you need a shot in the arm to say, why am I doing this work? Going to something like that where you see the public housing residents who we're ultimately serving changing their lives, moving to the better. It's especially neat to hear people talk about how much their kids have changed because they've seen their parents in a different light. So if you've got a local PHA that you could get to in an evening or even one afternoon, and you're able to be at some of those events, it's just really neat, and I think it's well worth it. And also, PHAs are really honored when HUD staff actually comes out to see what they're doing. So I would just really recommend just talking to them and seeing if you can get out to any of their activities. Sort of above and beyond all that, some field offices actually convene their quarterly or annual roundtable meetings for FSS grantees, and some actually include Ross grantees as well. Sometimes FSS grantees organize themselves into state or regional groups. Again, you could offer to come to their meeting maybe once in a while if they've got questions for HUD, or if you want to be really involved and really know what's going on in their programs, you could just go on a regular basis, and not always as the voice of HUD, but just to kind of hear what are the challenges, what are the successes, and how might you be able to help or connect to other programs that might be out there in the world that could help their program. There's also, I'm not sure if you know about, there's an FSS Yahoo group listserv. It's very, very active. One caveat is that because it's not a HUD platform, HUD employees can't actually post. We physically could, but we're not allowed to post onto the Yahoo group. So, but what it's really good for is to be able to see what kind of questions people are having. Around NOFA time, there's often a lot of questions about maybe changes that have happened in the NOFA or things like that. And So sometimes I monitor that so I can head things off at the pass when I understand that there's a question that's going around with a lot of people. But also it's really interesting just to watch, what should we do about this situation? Have you ever seen something like this? I've got this, this participant who is doing this or that. What would you recommend? And so it's all peer advice and peer-led. So again, it's not official, but sometimes I find it really interesting just as a program manager to kind of see, hey, this is how we thought things are supposed to work, but these are the challenges that are happening on the ground. And you can also get, it's a wonderful resource too if you have grantees that call and ask you, how do I find out about trainings? Or I'm really having a hard time getting people into my program. The Yahoo group is a wealth of knowledge, and also it's just a national network of people who are all doing the same thing. So you can also send your grantees to that listserv. I didn't actually put the link into this presentation, but feel free to email me and I'll hook you up with the link to subscribe to that listserv. And you can either have it delivered to all the messages delivered to your account as they come in, but there's a lot of them, or that you could get one daily digest, or actually the way I have it set up is I don't get any emails in my inbox, but I can just go to the Yahoo group site and look at the messages there. And then finally, if you have the opportunity to do some training, I know you're probably all laughing, what are you talking about? We don't have any training money. And I just remember when I was in the field, and sometimes happens here at headquarters, sometimes right towards the end of the year when we haven't had any money all year, all of a sudden there's an opportunity to do a training. I actually went through the NAN-McKay FSS regulations class, and it really helped me understand the program better and be able to give better technical assistance and guidance to grantees. So if the opportunity comes up, especially if they're doing one in your area that you wouldn't have to pay for travel, I would really recommend just looking into that, because that I think really helps with grant management. So those are all the tips that we have for you today. We'd love to hear tools that you use, things that you have developed for yourself, things, little tricks that help you do your grant monitoring, and that might be helpful to share with other folks. We'll continue to do this probably on the grant calls, the monthly FOGA calls, to really talk about what works, what's not working, and how we can really help each other to do our grant monitoring in the most both expeditious but also really relationally strong way, because ultimately, as we know, we're really all working for the advancement of our residents. So thank you again for the work that you do, and please feel free to reach out and let me know if you have any questions or concerns or other ideas. Thanks.